Story 1. A few years ago, my then-girlfriend and I embarked on what was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime across the American countryside. This journey held special meaning because I had hidden a ring in my bag. I planned to propose during one of our nights under the open sky. We traveled in my reliable pickup truck with a spacious cargo bed. We laid an air mattress there and slept beneath countless stars almost every night. I had never enjoyed traditional tent camping, so this setup felt like the perfect compromise, comfortable yet adventurous. We both adored the outdoors, though we openly admitted we weren't hardcore survivalists. Every evening felt magical. We would fall asleep gazing at the Milky Way, the silence broken only by gentle wind and distant animal calls. But my fiancée was an extremely light sleeper. Every rustle, every gust of wind jolted her awake. On top of that, she carried a deep, paralyzing fear of bears, ever since hearing a horrifying story from a coworker whose family had been attacked while camping. About 3/4 through the trip, I proposed. She said yes with tears in her eyes. One of the happiest moments of my entire life. That night I slept like a baby, relieved and overjoyed. The next morning she looked exhausted. When I gently asked why, she hesitated, then confessed she had woken up multiple times because she swore she heard footsteps circling the truck and faint mumbling voices. She stayed frozen in the bed, too terrified to look over the edge. I believed she had heard something real, but I tried to calm her, suggesting it was probably just wildlife. Before leaving, she pointed out a small footprint in the dirt right beside the truck. I tried to downplay it, but I could see genuine fear in her eyes. I thoroughly checked the vehicle. No one was hiding inside. Strangely, my trip planner was lying open on the back seat to the exact page listing our nightly stops. I didn't think much of it at the time and simply put it away. The following night was our last in the wilderness. She was noticeably more anxious than before. The beautiful silence now felt threatening to her. I promised to stay awake until she fell asleep. It took time, but around midnight she finally drifted off. I even played an old season of Family Guy on my portable DVD player to help her relax and drown out the quiet. I was just beginning to doze when I heard movement outside. Footsteps that sounded too heavy for a raccoon or coyote. Heart pounding, I quietly crawled to the edge of the truck bed and peered over. A hooded figure was circling the front of the truck, muttering softly to themselves. It was a smaller person, clearly a woman, with blonde hair spilling from under the hood. Panic surged through me. I didn't want to wake my fiancée and risk making noise. I considered jumping out to confront her, but feared she might be armed or have an accomplice. Instead, I quickly typed a note on my phone. "Don't make a sound. Someone is outside the truck. I'll distract them. Take the keys, start the engine, and I'll jump back in." I gently woke her, holding my finger to my lips, and showed her the message. Her eyes widened in terror, but she stayed silent. I handed her the keys, grabbed my pocket knife, and leaped out of the truck, shouting to scare the intruder away. But no one was visible. For a split second, I lowered my guard. An excruciating pain exploded in my ankle. The woman had been hiding directly underneath the truck. She smashed my ankle viciously with a thick tree branch. I collapsed, and as I tried to stand, she crawled out screaming like a wild animal and hurled the branch at my head. I raised my arms just in time. Then she pulled out a large kitchen knife and began swinging it wildly, her eyes filled with pure rage. I backed away quickly, trying to draw her farther from the truck. Once I felt we were at a safe distance, I screamed for my fiancée to start the engine. She jumped into the driver's seat and roared the truck forward, kicking up a massive cloud of dust. The woman immediately turned and sprinted toward her. At the last moment, she dove aside. Her hood flew back, and in the moonlight, I finally saw her face clearly. It was my ex-girlfriend from 6 years earlier. Our breakup had been toxic and violent. She had stalked me relentlessly back then, showing up outside my house at night. I had even needed to involve the police, I thought she had finally moved on with her life, but here she was, hundreds of miles from home, following us across the country, using information from my planner to track our exact locations. She dropped to her knees, sobbing hysterically. My fiancé circled back, and I barely had time to jump into the passenger seat before we sped away into the night. As soon as we had cell service, I called the police and reported everything. Days later, they located her. Shockingly, she didn't deny any of it. She admitted she had wanted to kill my fiancé and even asked to be taken into custody because she knew she was dangerously unwell. The last I heard, she was placed in a psychiatric institution. My wife still occasionally checks her social media profiles, but she remains missing from the internet. I rarely dwell on that night now, but whenever I hear similar stories, the memory hits me like ice water. It's a terrifying reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't strangers in the dark. They're people who once claimed they loved you. Story 2. What if the innocent, abandoned barn you decided to explore during a carefree girls' road trip wasn't empty at all? What if 3 masked strangers had been silently watching you the entire afternoon and were only waiting for darkness to strike? I've always been the careful, overly organized type. Spontaneous adventures usually fill me with anxiety. I need plans, checklists, and safety nets. So when my free-spirited friend Alyssa invited my recently single friend Sarah and me on a cross-country road trip right after our painful breakups, my first reaction was pure panic. But something inside me whispered that maybe this was exactly what we needed to heal. The first days were difficult for me. I hated not knowing what would happen next. Yet the open roads, breathtaking landscapes, and deep conversations slowly worked their magic. We visited stunning viewpoints, partied in tiny roadside bars, slept on mountaintops, and met kind strangers. It felt liberating. One afternoon, we passed a completely overgrown, abandoned barn and farmhouse complex. Vines choked the building so thickly, it looked like the earth itself was trying to reclaim them. Alyssa begged us to stop and explore, but fear gripped me. I imagined squatters, dangerous recluses, or worse. Too many true crime podcasts had planted permanent seeds of paranoia in my mind. Alyssa wouldn't let it go. For the entire rest of the trip, she kept casually mentioning the barn, gently wearing down our resistance. On the way back towards civilization, Sarah and I finally agreed, but only if it still looked completely deserted. Alyssa, with her incredible memory for routes, found the place again without hesitation. We arrived around 4:30 p.m. and parked the SUV a good distance away on the grass, not wanting to get too close in case someone was inside. The barn was even more unsettling up close. The wooden structure groaned and creaked constantly, as if breathing. Inside, strange, ancient-looking equipment stood covered in dust. Devices that resembled medieval torture instruments more than farming tools. We explored excitedly at first, taking dozens of photos and laughing nervously. Then we moved into the connected farmhouse. The interior was hollow and melancholic, completely empty except for one small green table and a matching wooden chair sitting sadly in the middle of a room. I couldn't stop thinking about the family that must have lived here decades ago, now erased by time. After hours of wandering and talking, the sun began to set. The atmosphere shifted. Alyssa and Sarah suggested we actually spend the night there. At that moment, flushed with the freedom of the trip, it sounded thrilling and rebellious. We carried our sleeping bags inside, ate sandwiches from the cooler, drank a few beers, and shared more stories. By 9 p.m., we were settled in our bags. We set alarms for early morning and quickly fell asleep from exhaustion. I'm a naturally light sleeper. Around 3 a.m., something yanked me from uneasy dreams. I thought I heard a soft, deliberate shush. My eyes snapped open. Moonlight barely filtered through the thick vines covering the windows. I scanned the room but saw nothing. Heart racing, I tried to convince myself it was just one of the girls snoring. I lay back down. Seconds later, a violent bang shook the entire door, as if someone had hurled their full body weight against it. The door, which we had to force open earlier, was now only propped against the frame. The impact was loud enough to wake both Alyssa and Sarah instantly. We sat bolt upright, frozen in terror, barely daring to breathe. Then came soft, deliberate tapping at the far window. It sounded like fingernails gently testing the glass. The banging on the door returned, louder and more aggressive. This was no animal or wind. These were people who knew we were inside. Suddenly, the door was shoved open with a long scraping sound. 3 figures stepped slowly into the room. 2 thin men and 1 thin woman, all appearing to be in their late 30s. They didn't rush. They simply walked in calmly and stood there, staring at us in complete silence. That slow, deliberate entrance was more horrifying than any sudden attack. Sarah screamed. One of the men immediately copied her scream exactly, mirroring her terror in a mocking, high-pitched wail. The woman began making soft shushing sounds as if trying to calm a child. The man in the center started gesturing strangely with his hands, like a twisted mime performance. Then, without any warning, all 3 simultaneously pulled on bizarre homemade masks. The middleman's mask was a giant, featureless purple cube that completely covered his head. The second man wore a crude cardboard version of a Batman mask, poorly cut and painted. The woman's mask was the most disturbing. A white medical-style mask with long, sharp plastic icicles dangling from both sides like demonic tusks. They began creeping closer, step by step. The more we panicked, screamed, and begged them to leave, the more agitated they became, screaming back at us in eerie, mocking imitation. The woman suddenly lunged and grabbed my shoulders with surprising strength. Because she was so unnaturally skinny, I managed to shove her violently to the floor. The 2 men turned to look at her. The one in the purple cube mask screamed in rage. "You're going to pay for that!" Sarah remembered the small pepper spray on her keychain and blasted it wildly toward them. The chemical cloud gave us a precious few seconds. We scrambled to our feet and ran for the door. The woman caught my ankle as we passed, her grip like iron. I kicked desperately until I broke free. While sprinting toward the car, I glanced back and saw her reaching behind her back, pulling something metallic from her waistband. We didn't wait to discover what it was. Their deranged screams followed us into the night as we jumped into the SUV and sped away, tires spinning on the dirt. None of them chased us on foot. We drove through the night in complete silence, eyes stinging from the pepper spray that had filled the air. We never reported the incident. After all, we had trespassed on private property. But the deepest terror for me remains the realization that when we explored the entire barn and house that afternoon, there had been absolutely no sign of life. No footprints in the thick dust, no food, no sleeping bags, no vehicles hidden anywhere. Those 3 masked lunatics had appeared from nowhere the moment darkness fell, as if they had been patiently waiting just for us. The mental scars from that night still linger. I'm grateful we escaped with our lives, but the image of those bizarre masks and their mirrored screams haunts my dreams. I think I've had enough of spontaneous road trips for the rest of my life. Story 3. Imagine being a struggling young comedian chasing your dream, driving alone through endless farmland at dusk, when both your front tires suddenly explode, and you realize someone has deliberately placed nails on the road to trap you. About 15 years ago, I was in my early 20s, living the classic, "I'm going to be famous someday" fantasy. School had never interested me much. I was always the class clown, the one who could make friends laugh effortlessly. Instead of college or a normal job, I decided to become a stand-up comedian. Reality hit hard. Nearly a decade of bombing on stage, tiny crowds, and almost no money. Stand-up is an incredibly tough, often soul-crushing grind, especially when you're unknown. To get any stage time at all, I had to drive long distances to whatever gigs I could find. My car was a complete wreck, and my phone even worse. One evening, I got what felt like my big chance. A comedy competition 5 hours away with real comedians as judges. I left early but got lost on backcountry roads after missing a turn. Eventually, I stopped at a tiny, decaying village with just one old gas station. A few rough-looking locals stood outside. They gave me short, unfriendly directions and stared at me with cold, dead eyes as I filled my tank. Their motionless, intense gazes made my skin crawl. I left as quickly as possible. An hour later, deep in dark forests, both my front tires blew out dramatically. They had been pierced by multiple large nails. My phone had almost no signal. While I waited for help, two vehicles appeared, one from behind and one from the front. They boxed me in. It was the same beat-up white pickup from the village. Before I could react, the rude man from the gas station was at my window, violently trying to open the door and pounding on the glass. Another man attacked the passenger side. They grunted and slammed against the car like wild animals. One of them suddenly let out a blood-curdling, inhuman scream that echoed through the woods. In pure panic, I shoved the door open, knocking him down, and sprinted into the forest. I dropped low just inside the tree line, hoping they would run past me. The trick worked. When I was sure they had gone deeper into the woods, I crept back to my car, grabbed my things, and ran down the road. Eventually, a kind woman stopped and helped me call the police. The officers found little evidence, and I even received tickets for my illegal car. I never discovered who those people were or why they targeted me. All I know is I was incredibly lucky to escape alive. That night taught me a brutal truth. In the middle of nowhere, some people are capable of anything when no witnesses are around.